Hi everybody, welcome back. I've got my monthly update for my Pan That Eyeshadow palette. So this palette here, which is a mixture of Modern Renaissance and Norvina shades. This is the palette that hopefully I can completely use up by the end of this year. So I do these monthly updates to show you the progress of the pans and how many times I've used each eyeshadow pan within the palette. So what I'm going to do a comparison photo this month compared to last month, because otherwise I think there's just going to be so many pictures of eyeshadows on the screen. But this is how this palette is looking at the moment. So this eyeshadow, which is Tempera, I used that one up in the last update, and I do have another pan, another complete empty to update you guys on this month. So I now currently have 12 eyeshadows left to be working on from this palette. So let's go through the individual pans and show you a picture of how they're looking today compared to how they were looking at the previous update. So I'll start off with the top row and then I'll work down to the bottom row. Because I have put some Norvina shades in this palette, sometimes the shade doesn't correspond with what's written underneath. I do have the correct shades written down in my notepad, so if it looks like I'm saying the wrong shade, I'm not. It's just that because this is a Modern Renaissance palette, I might end up talking about a Norvina shade, so it's probably labelled wrong in that case. Okay, so I won't start off with the very first shade in the palette because that is the shade that I finished off last month. So let's go to the second one. This one is called Golden Ochre. I used this one 7 times since the previous update. This is a really great yellowy beige colour. I like to use this one on a big fluffy brush to help blend out the edges of my finished eyeshadow look. Just helps to soften it a little bit more, and yeah, just helps with blending it out and making it look less harsh. I do like using this shade like that, so I need to up the usage. I think in the back of my mind I've always kind of associated this shade with being a good eyeshadow primer setting shade, but because I use the beige one for that base, I sometimes think, well, then I can't use Golden Ochre, but I do need to remember that it is great to blend out the edges of the eyeshadow once I'm completely done. So it's 7 uses since the previous update, and hopefully I can use this one a lot more in the next update, because this one, along with probably Railgar, are the shades that I haven't used the most. And I am quite a way away from hitting pan on this shade, let alone trying to use it up. The next shade along is Vermeer. This one I didn't use at all. There's quite a few, well 3 I suppose, similar shimmer shades in this palette. So because I was working on using up Primavera, I didn't really touch Vermeer, so I haven't used this one up at all. And now I'm trying to use up Summer. I don't think I will be using Vermeer much at all. I might try and use it as like an inner corner highlight shade, but because those 3 shimmer shades were all very, very similar, I didn't feel a need to wear all 3. Instead, I just kind of focused on one. So I don't think I'm going to use Vermeer much by the next update, but once I've used up Summer, I will start to use it up. The next one along is Base. This one I used 20 times since the previous update. This one is a great shade for setting my eyeshadow primer. This is a great, slightly warm, nude beige kind of colour. A great my skin tone, my eyelid skin tone colour. So yeah, great for setting my eyeshadow base. I can leave it like that, or I can then put on whatever eyeshadow I want over the top. So every single time I wear makeup, I wear this shade, so that's why I've used it 20 times since the past update. And this one will be an empty by the next update because there's not much left of it at all. There's product around the sides of it, so I need to get something sharp to help to kind of loosen up the powder so I can pick up more on my brush. And this pan does look considerably different to the last update. The pan has gotten a lot bigger, so I have no concerns that this one won't be an empty by the next update. Next one along, this one is actually a Norvina shade. This isn't Antique Bronze like it says below it. This one is Incense. This is a great warm brown shade, but there's about like 5 of these shades in the palette, so it's trying to kind of balance all of them in one look. So this one I tend to mix in with warm taupe on the bottom row to go underneath my lower lash line. The pan has gotten slightly bigger since the previous update. I have used it 16 times, so I've used it quite a lot of times, but I'm not really picking up shadow from round near the pan. I tend to kind of just go around the edges of this, so that's why it doesn't look that different despite using it, you know, 16 times. This one will still take a few months to completely use up, but I hope that it should be an empty by the end of the year. This is another Norvina shade. This one is called Eccentric. This one I only used once. This one is an incredibly warm orange brown shade. So where I do have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these warm brown shades, I tend to find that I don't really have much need for Eccentric. I think this could be quite a great colour for like autumn looks, like October, those pumpkin spiced kind of looks. So if this one is still around by then, I think this is when this one will get quite a bit more use. But for now I am kind of focusing on like raw sienna and burnt orange, so maybe once those two are used up I will start to use Eccentric that bit more frequently. This one is a pretty battered shade as well. It got battered when I depotted it into this palette, so there's not actually too much left. It is pretty flat, so I think once I do start to focus on it, this one should be fairly easy to use up. Cypress Umber I've only used 5 times. I was using this over a brown pencil eyeliner, but I stopped wearing that brown eyeliner as an eyeliner on my upper lash line, so I kind of then stopped wearing Cypress Umber. This is too dark for me as an eyeshadow, so that's why I tended to only use it as an eyeliner. I will try to start using it more like that because I've only used it 5 times since the last update. It's probably my least favourite shade in the palette. It's far too dark and I just don't really find myself reaching for it that often, and this doesn't look that different at all compared to the previous update photo. Next row, starting off with raw sienna and burnt orange. I tend to kind of group these two into one because I mix both of these in with each other to use as a crease shade. So both of them I've used 19 times. Looks like I'm going to use up raw sienna quicker than burnt orange. Both of these pans have gotten bigger since the previous update. That makes sense because I tend to kind of take shadow from round the pan itself, and I've used them 19 times, so I have used them quite a lot of times. Raw sienna I don't think is going to be an empty by the next update. I think both of them will be an empty by the beginning of July update, and then once those two are done I can then focus more on Incense, Eccentric and Warm Taupe, because like I've just said, I have like 5 of these warm browns in this palette and there's quite a lot of them to kind of juggle into one makeup look. Next shade along is Primavera. This one is my empty for this month. This one I finished off on the 9th of May and it took me 18 uses to entirely use this one up since the previous update. I was using a brush, a flat packer brush with this, and then I was using my finger, and then it got to the point where it was looking like Base and Dreamer, where there was just pan around the edges of just eyeshadow, sorry, around the edges of the pan. So I had to take a sharp kind of like nail tool to kind of scrape away at the product, and then I was able to pick up more. So finally used that one up. It was a lovely shade, a lovely light yellow warm gold shade, great all over the lid with a bit of Dreamer mixed in. So now that that one has been finished off, I will start working on the one next to it, which is called Summer. I've only used this one twice though, but that's because it is currently, as I'm filming this, the 12th of May, and having used up Primavera on the 9th, I've only had time really to wear Summer twice, but Summer should hopefully start to go down fairly quickly now that this is going to be like my primary shimmer shade of the palette. Not quite as yellow gold as Primavera, but still a very beautiful, pretty, warm shimmer shade. Next one along is Dreamer. This is a Norvina shade, it's not Venetian Red, it's Dreamer. This one I used 14 times and I like to mix that one in with Primavera, so I will start mixing that one in with Summer. Dreamer is a great warm pure gold shade. It is so beautiful, and I'm having to scrape this shadow so I can pick up enough of it because it's difficult to get my finger in to pick up product, it's difficult to get a brush in, so this one definitely needs scraping. And this one along with Base will also be an empty by the next update. These are both shades that I reach for basically every time I use this palette, so I don't think either of these two will be difficult to have finished off by the next update. Penultimate shade is Warm Taupe. This one I used 15 times. This one I mix in with Incense to go under my lower lash line. I have in the past used Warm Taupe as a powder face contour, and it does work alright like that, but I just forget to do that. And where the pan is so small as well, using a bigger face brush to pick up product is just a bit awkward, so I might start doing what I do with some of these shades that don't have much left, scrape out some of it, and then it makes it easier to get some on a bigger brush. But 15 times since the past update video. And then the next one along is Railgar. This one I only used once. I find Railgar and Eccentric probably the two most difficult shades in this palette to wear because they're so incredibly warm, which I obviously as a true autumn really like in my makeup looks, that's fine, but I find that they are that bit more difficult to blend in with the rest of the palette. The rest of the palette, the shades all work really nicely together, but Railgar is like a reddish orange, so it's a bit more of like a standalone eyeshadow look when I wear Railgar. So that's really why I've only worn it once. I just find it that bit more difficult to combine into a cohesive eyeshadow look. So this update video is kind of like a third of the way through the year check-in video, because I've been working on this palette for all of January, February, March and April. So this is the progress after 4 months of focusing on this eyeshadow palette. So I think I've done pretty well. 2 empties, 2 eyeshadow pans that will be empties by the next update, and then those 2 should be empties after that as well. This one won't be too far along, and then hopefully this one as well, and then this one, and hopefully that one. So it's going to be interesting to see how this palette is looking in the beginning of July update video, because that will be my halfway through the year check-in. So hopefully by then these 2 will be finished off, and then these 2, so that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pans within the palette, so nearly halfway through this palette. So I'm really pleased with the progress on this one. I'm getting to the point where I've got such big pans, it's exciting to see them get even smaller and then to completely kind of use them up. So hope you liked that update, hope you found it interesting. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up. Thanks once again for watching, and I will see you again very soon for my next video. Bye!